Welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Phil Arno. We hear a lot of horror stories about the dangers in our world today. Guns all by themselves. They kill people. The climate is going to end the world by the year 2012. Wait. If we don't vaccinate our kids, their future looks mighty bleak. So much to keep us awake every night, right? Well, folks, bad news. I'm here to tell you that that gun that you have locked up in your safe is ready to sneak out, and in the middle of the night, wait a minute, that's something somebody snuck in from the Buffalo News while I wasn't looking. Forget about that. But there is something serious. There's a threat here that is in our society that I want to discuss on this big picture. And that, although hopefully you will never be affected by this horrible thing that's invading our society right now, please pay attention, because if someone close to you is ever affected, the next 30 minutes may help you to save a life. 105,000 people last year died by drug overdose. That's 5 times the number killed by gun homicides in this country. But listening to the news, you wouldn't have known that. I knew someone, a young girl, who died because of a drug overdose last year. You may know someone, maybe someone close to you. Maybe you know someone who you don't even expect are using drugs, and they're living today, they're breathing, they're smiling and living their lives. But maybe they won't be around you at this point by the end of the year. It happens, folks. Don't be one of those people who say, I never thought it could happen to us. Now with me today on this big picture is a lady who is all too familiar with what drugs do in our community today. Cheryll Moore is a medical drug administrator with the Erie County Health Department. I have taken training with Cheryll in the use of Narcan, something you should have. Everyone listening right now should have this. It saves lives. And we'll tell you how to get it and how to use it. So, welcome to the show, Cheryll. It is a real problem. People may not have heard too much about drug overdoses in Erie County specifically. This is something you deal with almost every day. And tell me a little bit about what goes on and what people should know about drugs in the overdose problem, whether it's prescription drugs or illegal drugs or whatever.
Okay. Thank you so much for your interest in this. We appreciate it. We are in probably the biggest epidemic of our lifetime here. We are losing people from drug overdoses, which are poisonings, is what they are today, at numbers like we have never seen before in Erie County. Last year, we had 306 confirmed deaths in our county. That is crazy. And there's still that are 2 outstanding. We're waiting the toxicology screens. This year, we're not in a much better place. We have 145 probable deaths already. There's not that many days in the year so far. So we're talking about more than a death every day. What is occurring in our community is changing rapidly. What we have learned initially at the beginning of our epidemic, initiated by pill use, prescription drugs, 86% of people were prescribed opioids who are struggling with opiate use disorder today by a provider. They took them long term. They didn't necessarily communicate well with their provider, but we didn't know a lot about the substance and how it works with opioids. The more you take, the more you need. So people were very self-sufficient. They doctor shopped. They went from their primary care provider to their dentist to their OBGYN, and they got all these different opioid scripts because they weren't feeling good without them. They were in something called withdrawal. This really occurred pretty rapidly. In 2014, we put a law in place in New York State called ISTOP that limited access to prescription drugs, and our death numbers went up. We didn't understand how sick people were was the problem. Who did were drug cartels, and they have flooded our streets with illicit substances, and that's really the beginning of our epidemic. No different than anywhere in the country, as we've talked about. This is affecting everyone everywhere. Today, people can't really say, I don't know somebody. You know, everybody knows somebody. We just may not acknowledge it.
It's one of those things where you kind of say, like I've mentioned before, I didn't realize it could happen here.
Correct. Or why did it, how did it happen to me?
Yeah, it's denial that, maybe somebody that you know or somebody that you're close to could conceivably be abusing drugs without you knowing.
Correct. You're absolutely right. And people that are struggling with opiate use disorder, that is the name of the disease. That it started with pills and transitioned to street products. They did this for a reason, because without them they couldn't function. It wasn't everybody. It was 10 to 15% of people that had initiated on prescriptions. In 2014, we limited the access, so people went to the street. Heroin was our original opiate, and people talk about it. And they were purchasing things on the street. They were purchasing pills that they thought were real, that were adulterated with fentanyl. In our community, fentanyl is the killer.
Yeah, you said something a while back when I did training with you, and that just blew me away. You said something about the equivalent of 3 grains of salt.
Correct.
Which is minute. I mean, that's, I can't imagine. 3 grains of salt is enough to kill a person.
Correct. So the fentanyl we're talking about, super duper potent. It is not the prescription type. Fentanyl is a prescription drug. People have it, the pain patch, the Duragesic pain patch that they move around, that is the prescription. What we are talking about on the street is a powder. It is illicit fentanyl. These are analogs of the legally approved drug, the equivalent of 3 to 5 grains of salt. When we think about that, that's all it takes to kill a non-opioid user.
And people who are addicted, that's one category. There are other people who don't really normally use drugs, but want to experiment or want to celebrate or whatever. And that's really dangerous.
Today, it's extremely dangerous. As I said at the beginning of the epidemic, what we saw were mostly younger people. Our average age of death was a 38-year-old. 20 to 39-year-olds, biggest chunk of people we were losing. Transitioning from prescription use to street drugs, because opioids are opioids, doesn't matter where you get them. And then we saw a change from COVID. Today, the majority of the people that we are losing are much older, in their 50s and their 60s. Our average age of death is in the 50s.
Now, do we know how or why that is?
Yes, we do. We think we do now. We are seeing a change in drugs. More than 55% of our deaths last year were a combination of cocaine with fentanyl. This is a different person. Cocaine is a stimulant. People generally are not using cocaine every day. Some people, yeah, but not in general. When you talk to people, it may be celebratory, as you brought up. Someone, and in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, very prevalent. And what people were using was cocaine. The problem today, it is being cut with fentanyl. So this individual thinks they are getting a stimulant, which was very prevalent. We read about it in movie stars. We hear about this all the time. So there's a perception it's okay. Today it is not. It is cut with the strongest opioid out there, which is fentanyl. The fentanyl today, crazy, 50 to 100 times stronger than the heroin that had been on the street.
Where is the fentanyl coming from?
We believe it comes out of China. That's where it came initially. It was being shipped to Mexico. They were combining it with heroin at the time and then shipping it up in the traditional drug routes. The dark web took over. A couple years into the epidemic, people would go online on the dark web, that parallel web. They would order things and think they knew what they were ordering. Who knows what came in their mailbox? We have no idea. So we saw a shift there. People being, very self-sufficient. I'm going to take care of me. I'm sick. Because when somebody's struggling, if you know someone, they're trying to not have diarrhea, not vomit, not really think that they have to rip their skin off because there's something underneath it trying to get it out. These are all withdrawal symptoms I'm talking about. Now, somebody struggling with opiate use disorder, that is just a cycle. Over and over and over and over. We got to keep filling the receptors so the withdrawals don't happen. The individual we're talking about today, this different person, they're not expecting an opioid. And they are completely blindsided. Cocaine's been a very social drug over the years, and we know this. You would see it in bars. You would see it at parties. Somebody would celebrate something. You would see it when you talk about movies being made on movie sets, things people strive for. Much different today.
What is fentanyl? It's not a plant-based thing. It's a chemical-based thing.
Correct. So fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. Heroin, that is the original opiate. You grew a poppy, you farmed a field, you did something in a lab to create opium, and then you created heroin. All of our prescriptions, and fentanyl is a prescription drug also, those are opioids. So what we did is we took that molecule, we went in a lab, and we replicated it. And we're really good and we're really smart. So we were able to do that, and we were able to make it much faster, much stronger, and the key here, much cheaper.
Now, you said when we took the training before, you said that basically what the opioid does is it gets to the receptors, the pleasure receptors,
Right.
for lack of a better way to put it, and it kind of coats these receptors, and it gives you that feeling of high.
You feel good.
And eventually, you need more and more of it to
Correct.
maintain that feeling of high. And as it coats these receptors, eventually the ill effect that we're talking about in the overdose is it will coat the receptors in your brain that controls breathing.
Correct.
And that's when you pass out and you stop breathing, and when you stop breathing, then everything shuts down.
Exactly.
Okay,
So what happens in an overdose? I think that's what we're looking at
Right.
here. When someone takes too many opioids, it does not matter what the opioid is, whether it is a prescription drug like Vicodin or Lortab, or it's something someone purchased on the street. Doesn't matter. We have something called mu receptors in our body. Those are opioid receptor sites. So you take your opioid, it gets in your bloodstream, and it lands on your mu receptor. This process makes you feel good. That's what it is. You feel good. If you work out and you release your endorphins, they land on those same receptors, and you feel good. So now we feel great. When you take opioids, though, and it doesn't take a long time, more of those receptors pop up. That's where the tolerance comes from, why people need more and more and more medication. Opioids themselves do not heal things. They make you not feel them. It's a different feeling. So now over time, more receptors have popped up. People self-medicate. So maybe they double up their dose or they triple up their dose, and they just take too much. So they fill up all those receptors, extras floating around in their bloodstream, and their brain's no longer responding to carbon dioxide, and they stop breathing.
Overdoses come in, and you just
Correct.
it just blindsides you. You think you're basically doing something that's just going to make you feel good, and then suddenly you
stop
black out,
breathing.
and that's it.
They have no idea what's hitting them. Some of the things we're talking to with people today, make sure you know what you're doing. You need to test things. I'd rather you didn't do it. I really would rather, but the reality of life is these products are expensive. People spend a lot of money. Seeing an older person that is overdosing on cocaine adulterated with fentanyl, we have to think about it. Cocaine's not cheap. Young people don't have resources for this. And in the population of people that are around in the 80s and the 90s, 2000s in the clubs, their perception is it's the same product. And it's not.
Well, we're just about out of time in this segment. When we come back, we're going to talk about what to do
Excellent.
if you know somebody that's in trouble. And there's a lot of things that we need to talk about there. So we'll be back just right after this, and stay tuned because this is important. It could save a life, somebody that you know or are close to. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Big Picture. My guest is Cheryll Moore, who's with the Erie County Health Department, and we're talking about drugs and overdoses and things that are dangerous. So pay attention, because this may help you at some point when you really need it. So we talked about fentanyl, we talked about prescription drugs and all the things that creep up on you and can cause problems.
Right.
Now let's talk about the people out there who don't expect that they're going to face any of these problems. They don't think that anybody close to them could be having a problem like this. And they're one of those people that are going to, at some point in their life, say, I never thought it could happen to me. You never know. And there are stories that will, shock you, because people just, you have stories.
Yes, I have plenty
You've
of
got
stories.
plenty of stories.
Plenty of stories. And it's when you least expect it, to be perfectly honest with you. I've had a school nurse share with me that she looked out of her office window and saw an individual across the street and went across and saved their life. So these are the kind of situations we're talking about. Narcan, simply first aid. And that's what we have to understand. It's a do no harm drug. You're never going to hurt anybody with it. Everyone should have it in their first aid kit.
And this is Narcan. This is something that if I'm correct, you said we're going to try to get this into the hands of people more easily now.
Correct.
You know, we're going to make it available. And like you say, there's no downside to using this. It doesn't hurt anybody.
No.
And, you know, if you suspect that somebody needs it.
I do want to share with you how safe it is. The FDA and the DEA have approved it for over-the-counter sales. So it will be over-the-counter. I've talked to the manufacturer. They're figuring around September. By the time they figure out all the logistics of it, they would not do that with a drug that you could get hurt with. So we have to be assured it's very, very safe. So let's talk about overdoses overall. Unanticipated. Let's talk about the family situation. You have littles in your house and they go visit somebody that opioids are still prescribed. We have to realize that. And people are on them long term. Who can open prescription bottles? It's not me. It's usually the little ones that are around. Now, if they get into opioids, you call poison control. They walk you through saving your child. So reason number one, critical, first aid. We take prescription medications for many, many reasons. As we age, and I'm going to put myself right in there, our metabolism changes. What I took 10 years ago, I'm probably not metabolizing the same I am today. Accidental overdoses still continue. Partying, thinking we're having a good time and getting our social drugs. You know, taking some cocaine, crack, Molly, all these social products, and they're caught with fentanyl. If someone has Narcan, they can get that person breathing. How do overdoses happen? Someone simply just has too much, as I described before. When we give someone Narcan, and what we have today is a nasal spray, very simple, things people have seen for many, many years. They simply stick it in someone's nose and push the button. At that point there, it's going to those same receptor sites as the opioids like, but it likes them better. That's all it is. It likes them better. So it's going to kick the opioid off, and it's going to block the receptor. Now, that person will start breathing at that point, but they're not going to feel good. They're probably going to have diarrhea and be throwing up, and they hurt. They just don't feel good. So we got to understand that. But all of that pales compared to not breathing.
Well, exactly. And you know what? One of the misconceptions, and we have to remember that this is a nasal spray.
Correct.
But it's not something that you expect somebody to breathe in.
No.
It is not for somebody who's breathing. It's for somebody who's not breathing.
Correct.
In the way you explained it before, and this makes perfect sense. It is absorbed through the membrane.
Right here.
And then it penetrates, and it basically gets the brain to start the breathing process again.
Correct.
Okay.
So how does Narcan work? Let's show you. How do we use it? We simply open up a package. If someone is not breathing, very simply, see how you open it up? We hold it just like this with our fingers here.
Put it into one nostril.
One nostril, and we're going to push the button. I'm going to show you a dose of Narcan here. Here we go.
Oh.
That was it.
Yep.
Now in the nostril there, it's getting in my bloodstream, and it's going after, it's laying right here on those capillaries in my sinus cavity on the surface, and it's getting absorbed. Today, most overdoses do require multiple doses, 2, 3, 4 doses to get someone breathing. So we give somebody a dose, we wait a minute or two to give it time to absorb in those capillaries. Next dose is going to come over here to this side. If I go to a third, it's going to be here. Now it's going to get in my bloodstream, and it's going to aim for those same receptors that are all full of opioids. It likes them better than the opioids. So it's going to get in there, it's going to kick it off, and it's just going to block it. Okay. That's all it's going to do.
You know, and how do you know to give somebody Narcan? I mean, when you come up to somebody who's not breathing or doesn't seem to be breathing.
Right. It's a rule out. So I'm glad you asked that. You're never going to harm someone with Narcan. We've had a lot of attention on cardiac because of everything in our community. We have to understand that Narcan will get you breathing again. It's not going to get your heart going again. But if you are not breathing for a period of time, your heart will stop. So we need to get you breathing before your heart stops. Narcan itself literally is a placeholder. So you come on someone, and perhaps they're like kind of bobbling all over the place. You're talking to them, and the words aren't making sense. Now you continue to talk to them, and they're just like, ugh, they're like jelly. They're not responding to you anymore. What you're going to do is called a sternal rub. You're going to make a fist and make pointy knuckles and rub really hard on their chest bone. If they don't respond, that's an overdose. That's it. That's it. If you give Narcan to the wrong person, perhaps maybe they drank too much. If somebody's really drunk, sometimes they don't respond. It's okay.
And at this point, they're incoherent.
Correct.
If they're still breathing, do you give them the Narcan?
If they're struggling. The key is lack of responsiveness. So you do that sternal rub, but if they're doing this, like that's called agonal breathing, that funny noise, don't wait for that to stop.
Okay.
The key is the lack of responsiveness. At that point, we're going to lay them down. We're going to put their chin up in the air, and we're going to give them a dose of Narcan.
Okay.
It's going to lay right in here on the capillaries and get absorbed.
Okay. So for the people out there who are saying, well, I probably will never need it, but, you're making a case for me having it around. Now, I got this after we did the training. Correct. I went to my pharmacy, and I said, do you have this, and can I get it? And they said, yeah, your insurance covers it. It's $5.
Perfect.
So no problem. Now, and if it's over the counter come fall, if people get this, you would suggest that they put it in their medicine cabinet or maybe put it in their glove compartment or whatever, but to have it handy if somebody in the house needs it, or if you're standing in line at a fast food, or if you're basically in an auditorium somewhere and
you're at a red light and the car in front of you isn't moving.
Right. So you're in a situation where you recognize that somebody needs this, and you're within a minute or so of going back to where you have it in your glove compartment or whatever. At least you can help.
Correct. And you gave someone a chance.
Life.
That is our key
Yes.
here. We give someone a chance. And I'm so glad you brought that up. Death is final. We have to acknowledge that. We have to understand that. Baddest behaviors can be with somebody struggling with opiate use disorder. And I can tell you, there's crazy behaviors. I've lived it in my family my whole life. I've lost a sister. We talk about it regularly because we need to share. We need to understand. She did not want to be sick, but the behaviors were crazy, but that was untreated disease. When we get people treated, those crazy behaviors go away. They really do. Chronic disease that people have their whole life. So let's get them on a pathway of recovery. I'm
a volunteer first responder. A lot of people out there, they have second thoughts. They're not sure, hey, should I get involved? Could I get into trouble?
In New York State, you will not get in any trouble at all. There can be paraphernalia around, there can be drugs around, there can be all kinds of things. If your best intention is I'm going to save your life, that's the key here. You won't get in any trouble. Now, under the Good Samaritan law, there are some conditions. If somebody has enough drugs for drug sales, you're going to go to jail. That's a different story here. Or if you're on probation or parole and part of your conditions are to stay away from drugs, please stay away from drugs. That's a different issue, but for the general public, no, you won't get in any trouble at all. And it's when you least expect it. I'll be honest with you, you just really don't know. I was at a club recently, and I had to give somebody 3 doses of Narcan. They couldn't have been any luckier because they fell out on me. Who else has a pocket full of Narcan? But honestly, it was not expected in any way, shape, or form. And people were running around like crazy. It was not who you expected. So, and this is what we have to understand. You have to really realize it happens everywhere.
Getting involved, especially if it's a stranger, and especially if it's a public street, and other people are standing there wondering what to do, and if you have the thought that, hey, I have Narcan, and it's handy, it's in my glove compartment. You have to consider that there's somebody there who needs help. Right. And it's somebody's son or daughter or sister or brother. And just think about if it was somebody who belonged to you. It's
somebody. And that's what we have to understand. This is simply first aid. If somebody were in a car accident and they had a limb amputated, we wouldn't think twice. We'd be running over there to put a tourniquet on. Think about it the same way. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. This is not treatment. This is not getting someone into a treatment agency, not getting them linked to a provider. This is getting them breathing so they can get treatment.
There's certain cautions that you should exercise because fentanyl is so...
Right.
You don't want to be close to breathing in fentanyl or even having it on your fingers or whatever. So if you see powder on a victim, don't get close to it. Don't touch it.
Yeah, and you probably won't. Whatever they have ingested, they have snorted or they smoked. We don't see a lot of injection anymore. A lot of smoking, a lot of snorting, taking in pill format. I didn't even bring that up. Pills today, if you purchase them outside of a drugstore, they are adulterated with fentanyl. I'm going to tell you right now. We have heard this over and over. People are on prescriptions, and they're not what we think. Different classes. Xanax on the street, which is a benzodiazepine, anything that has gone to the police lab is nothing but fentanyl.
No. Well, we've got about a minute left.
Okay.
What would you suggest if people want to have more information about this? Where should they go?
They can contact us at the health department. You can always call my phone number. It is 716-858-7695. I will get back to you. We have a text for Narcan number. If you text that number there, you will get Narcan at home. We also have test strips to be able to test products. Anything that people need. There is a wall unit for public places. If you would like them, these are all at no cost to individuals. We want this product out in the community. We will always get it out to people because those death numbers have to change.
This is very, very important. It may never come to play in your life. It may never be even close to you. But if it does come into your life, if it affects somebody that is important to you, it can make the difference between life and death. And there's very few things that we talk about that are that serious. So you should really consider going to the website, calling the phone number, getting a little bit of this Narcan and keeping it handy. Doesn't hurt, and it doesn't cost anything. There's no way to lose on this. So help the people around you, and you may be very happy someday that you did. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this very important Big Picture, and we appreciate it. We appreciate you watching WBBZ, and we'll see you next time on The Big Picture.